This is Redefining Trade, the podcast brought to you by TradeWindow to shine a light on the future of trade. Every month, our host Peter Foyston will be joined by those who are shifting the dial for trade across New Zealand, Australia, and Asia. We will be exploring the latest thinking on trade innovation, supply chain management, export trends, digital trade, blockchain, trade law, trade in the face of COVID-19, and we'll be opening a whole new window on the world of exporting.
Welcome back to Redefining Trade, the podcast that brings you the latest insights on the changing world of trade. Today we have Chris Nixon joining us. Chris is Principal Economist of NZIER. Chris has worked in many industries, examining their economic issues and developing practical solutions for the problems they face. Chris has particular interests in the industry structure and behavior, development performance criteria, cost-benefit analysis, trade, development, and trade policy issues. Chris has recently written a report titled Digital Trade is the Way Forward for New Zealand, which is a preliminary assessment of the costs and benefits of digital trade. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Chris, and I have some questions to ask you about the report, so let's get on with it. First, could you provide some insight into NZIER and what you do?
NZIER is an independent specialist consulting firm that uses applied economic research and analysis to provide a range of strategic advice for clients. We undertake and make freely available research reports aimed at promoting better understanding of New Zealand's importance in terms of its economic challenges through its public good program. We also have a quarterly survey of business opinion, which is the second longest running business opinion survey in the world, and quarterly predictions, which we make available to members. Our aim is to provide an independent advice and analysis to clients in government, business, and for not-for-profits.
Wow, that sounds like you've got a lot going on there. Now, could you explain to our listeners the purpose of the report, Digital Trade is the Way Forward for New Zealand, and who you think would ideally benefit from seeing this and why?
The purpose of the report really is to show the value of digital trade, not just for New Zealand, but also for its trading partners. In terms of who benefits, I think you've first got to remember that the consignments can have up to 200 queries or communications regarding their movements through the supply chain, and up to 30 parties may handle the consignment. So there's a lot going on here. And so digital trade can assist this process for producers. They can eliminate mistakes. They can make sure all their documentation's in line. And it also means that if those sorts of activities are being handled by automated processes, then skilled staff can focus on other issues within the company, more important issues. Then there are logistics companies. They can clearly identify what their role is, when they pick up consignments, how long it will take to clear customs, and other issues which crop up. And then there's the importers who receive the products. They know when they're going to get them. They also know when to make payments. And governments, since governments know what the trade is and they can make quicker judgments about the legitimacy of that trade. It allows for improvement in resource allocation within government as well. And then there's the consumers. For perishable products, they're able to get these products quicker, and so the quality is higher.
So there's a lot of people that could benefit from this, but there still seems to be a fair amount of resistance. Where is the greatest resistance to adopting digital trade?
I think there's always going to be challenges to adopting new technology. So that's the first point. The second point is that there are parties within the supply chain, both government and private sector, who actually benefit from paper trade. They are not they're not going to want to see digital trade progress. But these challenges can be overcome. And I think this is the key point. A demonstration effect of how this occurs is important. For example, the New Zealand government did a trial last year with kiwi fruit and found that it cut border waiting time from 2 days to 5 minutes.
And for companies that have a vested interest, especially when it's proven how successful digitization of trade can be, will they need to change their business model, or which are these vested interests that you think will be the toughest nuts to crack?
Well, I think there is going to be, they're going to have to reorganise their back office to some extent, and there's an initial cost to all of that. But the benefits of eliminating mistakes, all these practical nuts and bolts issues are incredibly time consuming for businesses. And I think that's the important benefit.
Okay, so what would you say are the top 3 insights that you found when writing the report?
I think because of this reorganisation of the way people do trade, there's a sort of a fundamentally quite large benefit. And these benefits are akin to a high quality free trade agreement or a tariff cut. I think that's an important point. I think also the importance of trust and obtaining trust, because all parties trust the information, trade becomes smoother. The benefits will not occur if trust doesn't exist. And as we've talked about, it's the challenges, I think, which need to be overcome. It seems to me that digital trade is the way forward, but it will take some time before people are convinced.
And when you talk about trust being so important, what is it, do you think, that the digitization of trade and the aspects of that have to do to prove that trust?
I think it's the fact that all the information is in one spot, and so they have the source, as it were, and that they can trust that source because only permission parties can access that information, and it allows them to have all the information, and it's clear what instructions are there, what payments are required and when, these sorts of things that exporters and importers are regularly engaged with.
And do you think that this level of trust will be gained relatively quickly, or do you think that it's going to be something which is more of the long game?
I think the fact that they are the only people who can actually access this information means that the trust is developed quite quickly. But again, it's a demonstration effect after the first consignment goes through relative to what they've had before under paper-based trade. And I think that is a key point.
Okay. Well, that's really helpful, and certainly seems like there's some pretty big benefits, but like always, there seems to be a couple of key barriers that you've outlined and what needs to happen here. So now I'm going to just give you a couple of, well, it's 3 questions that I'd just like you to kind of give me your gut reaction. So the first one is, who along the supply chain do you think benefits the most from digital trade solutions?
Well, I think in the first instance, we're talking about those who produce or manufacture the products. They will have to reorganise their back offices, but what that means is that they will move staff to more productive roles and focus on how they improve their product options rather than dealing with mistakes and communications with importers wanting to know what's going on when. these sorts of roles. And you've got to remember that we're talking about skilled staff here. And so their time is limited, and the fact that they're then able to focus on things that make the boat go faster rather than other issues is, I think, a major, major plus.
And do you think the pandemic has advanced or slowed down the development of digital trade globally?
Well, I think the pandemic has caused so much misery for individuals around the world. It also has forced a rethink on goods and services and how they're moved internationally. You know, when the first lockdown occurred, there were goods stranded all over the Asia Pacific because the planes weren't flying. So the documentation hadn't arrived. So governments had to actually act quite quickly, and digital trade really helped that process. There have been some estimates made that digital trade is has been turbocharged by COVID, advancing its use and practice by up to 5 years relative to a situation when COVID didn't exist. So the digital future, the digital trade future, is here now.
And are you seeing any backslipping as, parts of the world start to emerge, people kind of reverting to the old behavior?
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. But I think that as time goes on and there is a competitive advantage for some supply chains over others, then governments will wake up to this.
Okay, for the third and final one, if there was one thing that the New Zealand government could do right now to really support our exporters, what do you think it would be?
Well, I think we've got to give some credit to the New Zealand government. Over the past 2 years, they've moved quite quickly. They've run digital trade trials in Asia. They've signed the DEPA, which is the Digital Economy Partnership Agreement with Chile and Singapore. They've used APEC as a vehicle to push digital trade. And I think these have been very, very significant points. But like every country in the world, governments need to meet the challenge of coordinating and developing digital pathways, whether these are digital trade windows or ensuring that government is joined up on the nuts and bolts issues. This needs to be done. It's not that the government aren't doing these things, they are, but they need to move more quickly because we are a small country and
is
we
there
can be more
anything
flexible.
That organizations or, I guess, groups of people could do that could help facilitate the government's efforts?
I think what's being done now with this report and other communications with government, I'm sure that actually parts of government are really sold on the idea of digital trade. They see it as the future.
Thanks for joining us for the chat today. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure our listeners have found it very useful as well. And thanks so much for listening to the Redefining Trade podcast. If you'd like to be in touch with us, look out for our contact details in the show notes or email us at redefiningtrade@tradewindow.io, and have a great day.
This has been Redefining Trade by TradeWindow with our host Peter Foyston. Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit subscribe and keep an eye out for the next episode.